So let's look at slope-intercept form today. You need to know about linear equations. Linear equations, they are equations that when you graph them, they will make a straight line. Linear equations, something special about them, no variable in a linear equation can be raised to a power other than 1. Okay, so if it has like y equals x, that would be okay. But y equals x squared, that will not be linear. Okay, so just know that. It can only be raised to the power of 1 for a variable. Y-intercept is always the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So if I have a little sketch of a graph like this, and I graph a line, the y-intercept, it's this point right here in red where I'm crossing the y-axis. Slope-intercept form of a linear equation. You should know this from 7th grade, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you why it works, etc. But the slope-intercept form of a linear equation, the standard form is y equals mx plus b. And y equals mx plus b, something worth memorizing and knowing because it makes writing equations a lot easier. M always stands for the slope, also known as the rate of change. And the b value, that's always the y-intercept or the start value of your equation. So for example, if I give you an equation like this, what are the slope and y-intercept of y equals 2x minus 3? What I would want you to know is that the number multiplying x, the coefficient of x, that 2, that is the slope. So slope is 2. Now this doesn't say plus, it says minus. That could be a plus and negative 3. I just like to kind of grab that sign. The y-intercept, it looks like it is starting at negative 3. Okay. I want you to try to do this next problem on your own. Can you write an equation of a line if it has a slope of negative 6 and a y-intercept of 4? Okay, try that without me. Pause it. You should come up with something like this. Y equals slope times x, so slope is negative 6, x plus y-intercept, which is 4. Equation y equals negative 6x plus 4. It's in slope-intercept form. It's an equation for that line. All right, so I'm going to give you some problems, and your task is to try to write these in slope-intercept form. So I'll give you an equation that's not in slope-intercept form. I want you to transform it and then tell me what the slope is and what the y-intercept is. So here, the first equation, 2y plus 8 equals 6x. Now remember, I'm trying to get it into slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So notice my y variable is alone in this case. So I'm going to solve this like a typical equation by subtracting 8 from both sides first. And then I have 2y equals 6x minus 8. It's not alone because my y is being multiplied by 2. So to undo that, I'm going to divide. Remember, divide everything by 2. And so instead of saying y equals 6x minus 8 over 2, I'm going to actually take some time to divide the 6x by the 2 and the minus 8 by the 2. So I should have y equals 3x minus 4. What's nice about that, it's in the form I want it, y equals mx plus b. So my m, my slope value is 3, and my y-intercept, my b value, it's a minus 4 and negative 4 is where it's going to start. Okay, try this one on your own, please. Okay. So 5x minus 3y equals 21. I'm going to solve this just like I did the last problem. I want y equals mx plus b, so I want my y value alone. So the first thing I'll do is subtract 5x from both sides. Okay. And then I still have this minus sign with my 3y, so I have a negative 3y equals, and instead of writing 21 minus 5x, I'm going to write a minus 5x or a negative 5x plus 21 because I want it in mx plus b form. And then to get y alone, I'll be dividing both sides by negative 3. When I divide by negative 3, negative 3y divided by negative 3 is just y. Negative 5 divided by negative 3, it's a negative divided by a negative, so that's a positive, and I like to usually leave that in fraction form since it's not a whole number. I'll write that as 5/3 x. 21 divided by negative 3, that's a negative 7. So I could write plus negative 7. I usually write minus 7 for fewer symbols. So if y equals 5/3 x minus 7, my slope is 5/3, and my y-intercept is negative 7. So I hope you can check and see if you got that one right. All right, often we're going to want to write an equation from a graph. So we're looking at a graph and you'll try to figure out what is the equation from this graph. So here's some tips. If you're trying to write an equation from the graph, since we know we can write it in y equals mx plus b slope-intercept form, we really want to figure out what's the slope and what's the y-intercept. So first, find the y-intercept. 2, choose any 2 points and figure out the slope between them. Then you can use that slope and y-intercept to make your equation in y equals mx plus b form. But you need to know those 2 things. So if I was going to write an equation for this line, if you think you can do it, do try it on your own. If you don't think you can do it, watch along with me. So first I'm going to find the y-intercept. So where it's crossing the y-axis here, the y-intercept, my b value is 1. My slope, I need to choose my 2 points, and kind of like we did in the last lesson, I'm going to make a triangle between these 2 points because these are nice on the graph already. And it looks like from going from one point to another, it's rising -2, it's going down 2, and it's running, or the change in x, is 3. So it looks like my slope, rise over run, is -2/3. Then if I'm writing an equation from this, I'm going to write it in y equals mx plus b form. So I think y equals -2/3 x plus 1. It's a kind of simple way to write an equation without doing an extra lot of thought in there. All right, let's look at writing an equation from points. I think this is probably the hardest part that we have to do. And I will try to show you a couple strategies because I think it's useful to know more than one strategy from it. And let's look at this first one, A. If you're going to try to write an equation of a line through those 2 points, 6, 3, and 12, 5, the first thing to do is try to figure out what the slope is. If you can figure out the slope, half the battle is gone. So I know that the slope is change in y over change in x, in whatever way you want to do it. I'm going to look at the change in y. It goes from 3 to 5. It went up 2. And the change in x, it went from 6 to 12, so it went up 6. Therefore, my slope was 2 6, which equals 1/3. So how I like to think about this equation most of the time is 1/3 is going to be my slope. So I know that my equation is going to be y equals 1/3 x plus b, some value. And whether I formally plug it in or I just kind of think about it, in general, what I'm doing is picking a point. I'm going to pick 6, 3 just for its first. They both seem like about the same level of difficulty here. And I'm going to plug in those points. 6 is x and 3 is y. So I know that in my equation it has to make that point true. So 3 is my y equals 1/3 times x. X is 6 plus some value of b, which I'm trying to figure out. So I try to just basically solve this like an equation and figure out what b is. 3 equals 1/3 times 6 is 2 plus b. So 3 equals 2 plus b, so b must be 1 if I solve that down. So my y-intercept is 1. I already found earlier that my slope was 1/3. So I got the equation of y equals 1/3 x plus 1. And just so you know, it's really, really smart to check it in the other point and make sure it's true. Like I want to know if this 5 really is 1/3 times 12 plus 1. And 1/3 times 12, that's 4, plus 1 is 5. So it looks like it checks in the other point, and I probably got my equation right using that technique. Now there are other techniques to do that as well. That's just my personal favorite one. Try this one on your own. 422 and -2, -8. See if you can come up with an equation for the line through those points, and I will work it out as well. Okay, so again, first thing I'm going to do is find my slope. So change in y, it goes from 22 to -8, it goes down 30. My change in x, it goes from 4 to -2, it goes down 6. So it went down 30 and down 6. -30 divided by -6 is 5. Therefore, my slope is 5. So I know my equation is going to be something like this. Y equals 5x plus b, plus something. I'm going to try to figure out what that is. Again, I'll pick a point. I'm going to pick 422 just because it has positive numbers in it, and that's usually easier to work with. So y is 22 in that point, equals 5 times 4 plus b. 5 times 4 is 20. 22 equals 20 plus b, so 20 plus 2 is going to be 2. b must equal 2. And my equation should be like this. Y equals 5x plus 2. If I check it again in this point, 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8, which is what I have for y, so that's good. Okay. We are going to learn the slope song. We'll definitely have to go over this more in class because otherwise you won't get to learn the motions just by hearing me sing. So the slope song, I'm going to have you write your lyrics down. And this slope song, it just is a quick way to just sing it when you're trying to graph an equation from a line and trying to make it easy. So if you know that song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, this is the song that it's to. So it just goes something like this. I've got my y-intercepts on my graph. I'm gonna rise then run. On my graph, does it slope up or down? From the left, I've got my line graphed on my graph. Okay, so you try to memorize that a little. We'll sing it in class a few times, but let's try to look at how to use that to graph an equation. So if I'm trying to graph y equals 1/3 x minus 2, it's really good if you can pick out your slope is 1/3 and my y-intercept is negative 2. So I'm going to think about the slope song and I'm going to graph it. So I've got my y-intercept on my graph. So I'm always going to start there at the y-intercept, and that's b equals negative 2. So here's my y value, my y-axis. I'm going to go down to negative 2. And then the next line, I'm going to rise then run on my graph. Okay, so my slope here, it's 1/3, and remember slope is rise over run. So it looks like in this case my rise is 1 and my run is 3. So from this point that I have, this negative 2 here, I'm going to go up 1 and over 3, and I'm going to put a dot. Okay, and a lot of times I like to do that a few times, so go up 1, over 3, go off the graph a little, and put a dot. Once I have enough of those dots, so then I'm going to go ahead and connect those, and then I ask myself that third question, does it slope up or down from the left? And I think if you read this from left to right, you'll see it sloping up. Why you want to ask yourself that is to make sure you went in the right direction. Notice the slope is positive in this case. So if it's not sloping up left to right, you did something wrong. So once I've seen that it is sloping up left to right, I'm going to say with confidence, I've got my line graphed on my graph. So it's going to just put the slope song together, help us make a nice equation. That's what it looks like. I scaled it differently, but you can see it's the same general shape. Okay. So if you're going to wrap this up, here are the things I want you to think about today. How does changing the value of m affect the graph of the line? Try to come up with at least 2 things that you can tell me about in class. How does changing m affect what the graph looks like? At least 2 ways. What does changing the value of b do? Again, at least 2 ways. And then finally, can you write an equation that would do this? Slope down and cross the y-axis above the origin. Okay, well, I just thought about it. I'm going to be absent, I think, the day that we're doing this lesson, so I better give you some options for this, and then I'll wrap it up. But changing the value of m, that's the rate. So that affects how steep the graph is. It affects whether it slopes up or down from the left, so if it's going up, positive or negative. Changing the value of b affects the start value or changes the y-intercept, or where the graph starts. Okay, so if you want a graph that will slope down and cross the y-axis above the origin, then what I want to do is I want to make, if I'm going to slope down, I want a negative m. If I want it to cross the y-axis above the origin, that would be a positive y-intercept. So there are a ton of right answers for this, but one might be like y equals negative 2/3 x plus 6. As long as your rate is negative and your y-intercept is positive, you should be good here. Okay, practice the slope song, wrap it up. We will learn a lot about graphing. I hope you already did.